Chuck Schumer.
Hi, Scott Steinberg, West Rockaway Teachers
Yes, thank you
Association.
for coming, Scott. Hi.
Carrie Andrews, Regional Director of NICET.
Hi, Carrie, thank you.
Mark Illich, Penfield.
Yes, nice to see you, Mark.
Nice to see you again. I just
Right, yes,
jumped in
you
line
said
ahead.
hello. You get an extra handshake.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you for the good work you do. Judy, thanks.
Adam Mack, physics teacher here.
Hi, Adam. Oh, yes, Eck.
Yes.
Now, there's a fella I met in New York City who's the head of Spotify. He's Swedish. Is that a
Yeah.
Swedish name? His name is Eck, but it's E-K. Yours is E-C-K.
ECK, yeah,
Yeah.
not the same.
Sorry. Hi.
Jolene DeBranco, New York State United Teachers.
Nice to see you, Jolene. Hi, Sherry. Great to see you. Thanks for your good work. Okay, we know each other. He is not the tallest elected official in New York State. There's a guy who played basketball for St. John's named Carnegie, and he's 6'11". What are you, 6'8"?
6'8".
And here I thought I was in the running too.
But as long as I'm taller than Bob Duffy, it's all good.
Yes, you are. What was he, about 6'4"?
He is 6'5" or
Right,
so.
okay, great.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Brighton Central School District. We are honored to welcome, first and foremost, Senator Chuck Schumer to our campus
Thank
today.
you.
You're welcome. Also, we welcome members of the media, our school board president, Mark Kokonovich, Vice President Julian Gilbert, Monroe County School Board Association Executive Director Sherry Johnson, Assistant Superintendents Debbie Baker, Lou Limo, and Director of Student Services Carolyn Rabideau, our Brighton Teachers Association President Judy Wegman, Brighton Teacher Adam Eck, NICET Executive Vice President Jolene DeBrango, Penfield Superintendent and President of the Monroe County Council of School Superintendents, Tom Putnam, Penfield School Board Vice President Mark Elledge, and Dr. Michael Wisnowski, Professor and Dean Ralph C. Wilson Junior School of Education at St. John Fisher. Also Carrie Andrews, Regional Staff Director for NICET as well. My name is Kevin McGowan, and I am Superintendent of the Brighton Central School District and President of the New York State Council of School Superintendents. We are honored today to be hosting our United States Senator from the state of New York and the Minority Leader of the United States Senate, Chuck Schumer. Senator Schumer has been a champion in his advocacy for every community in our state and every child in our care. He is keenly aware of the challenges we face in public education and has been tireless in supporting our efforts to provide the most highly qualified professionals to work with our children. It has been both my experience and my understanding from my colleagues throughout the state that the issues the Senator will address today and has been addressing are of the utmost concern to superintendents and educators everywhere. Areas of teacher shortage present a real and present danger to the quality program that we provide to children as we prepare them to participate fully in our democracy. These challenges only increase in areas where economic capacity is less and student need is more. And as we begin the school year and welcome our dedicated staff back, we are again reminded of this challenge. We have the finest teachers in the land here in the state of New York. We need to work to maintain and enhance that legacy locally and throughout our great nation. Once again, thank you very much, Senator Schumer, for your work on our behalf in all matters, and for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you,
Do you want me to come on this side? It's a little barren
Yeah,
over
let's
here.
do both sides.
Come on over.
Showcasing the artwork.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we don't wanna block the
Yeah,
art.
this is great. Come on over. Just come right here. Come close. As Jay and the Americans once sang.
Very good.
From Lincoln High School, my wife's alma mater. Come a little bit closer. But I can't sing the next part. I like songs. I screwed it up yesterday. We were at the Back Bay in Long Island, and we were trying to bring the Back Bay back. They had a lot of problems, and I said, "The Back Bay boys are back." Back Bay boys.
Gotcha.
Back, and it was the Back Street Boys. It was close. That's clever. Yes. Anyway, I didn't sing that one either. Okay, anyway, it's great to be here, and we're starting out the school season. And first, I want to thank all of the people here, the faculty, the administrators, the teacher representatives, the school ed school representatives, all of whom are part of one of the things that makes Monroe County special, and that is our education. We have good education here in Monroe County, and it's one of the reasons that this area has continued to do quite well, despite the fact that some of the big companies have decreased in number of jobs, like Kodak or Xerox or Bausch & Lomb. And the reason is Rochester is known as one of the most, as having one of the best educated communities and workforces in not only the state, but in the country. And that goes to the credit of the people who are here. That's how we can attract good paying jobs. That's how we can keep people here in the Rochester area. Education is number one. If a young man or young woman comes out of school with a good education, they're gonna get a good job. And they're probably, the statistics show, you get a good education, your life is longer, healthier, and happier, not only wealthier. So it really matters. And who is the backbone of education here in the Rochester area and throughout our state and country? It's teachers. Teaching, in my view, I've always believed this, in the 21st century must be an exalted profession, like doctor or lawyer was in the 20th century, because it's so important in our ideas economy. You need education. Here in the Rochester area, we still do a lot, do a lot with machine tools, and you need welders. In the old days, welding was a visor and a blowtorch. But now the technology has made it so proficient that you need to know exactly depending on what metals you're welding, with the temperature and the time. You need algebra. If a kid is not proficient at algebra these days, they can't be a welder. That depends on our schools. So it's all very, very, very important. And attracting and keeping the best people to become teachers, that has been a tradition in this community and in many communities, but it's a harder and harder struggle. And so we need to do everything we can to make sure that we have the best teachers. But right now, there's a shortage of teachers in the Rochester, Finger Lakes area. It's important we do everything we can to prevent this shortage. The shortage is getting worse. As more teachers retire, the demand for new teachers is spiking at a rate we're not able to keep up with right now. So I'm here today to try and help that problem at the federal level with a two-pronged plan to expel this teacher shortage out of our classrooms. That's who we want expelled out of the classrooms. And first, we're urging our colleagues in the Congress to reject the administration's elimination of the Title II program. Title II was put together a while ago, and what it does is it helps school districts like this one in Brighton and all the other school districts represented here to recruit teachers, retain teachers. It's been an extremely successful program. And the second thing that we're proposing is that we expand and get really moving what's called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. That program says if you go into public service, teaching, or one of the other public professions, but teaching is the number one that's involved, your student loans get reduced or forgiven. You know, kids graduate from college these days with such high amounts of student loans, even when they want to teach. They figure they can't because the salary might not match another job that's less fulfilling and frankly less important. And so saying that we'll forgive your loans if you teach is a great way to both attract young people to teaching and retain teachers who are here. And so that's the second thing we want to do. Now in October 2018, NYSUD, which is New York State United Teachers, they do a great job, they released a report on the shortage. And it's alarming. The report, this report, which is alarming, says that over the next decade, New York State will have to hire between 10,000 and 18,000 new teachers each year to keep up with climbing demand. Well, in the last 9 years, we lost 21,000 teachers. So this is problematic. When we need more teachers, because of retirements, we're losing the absolute number of teachers. And the number of new college grads entering the teaching profession is going way down. So St. John Fisher has a grade ed program, and yet there's a 40% drop in education graduates over the last decade. So the Rochester area, which depends so much on excellence in education, is losing teachers and losing good teachers. I'm launching this push because educational professionals from around New York State, every part of New York State, have come to me and said we need help to address this crisis. Some Monroe districts say they've advertised teaching jobs in earth science, for instance, for 5 months and not received a single application. single application. Others have been forced to resort to hiring long-term substitutes. In other words, not a regular teacher, but a substitute who you pay on a per diem basis, I guess. Because they can't fill the position in things like family and consumer sciences and French, where there were 0 applicants. And so we need to double down. We need to really do things. And we have some programs that work. The Title II program, it's been working. You can ask the folks around me who are involved in it more than I have. It receives about $2 billion in funding each year. About $147 million comes to New York State, several million dollars here to the Rochester area. And one of the essential functions is retention of teachers. So seeing the Teach New York, which is a partnership between the SUNY system and the New York State Department of Education, they estimate that 40% of the new teachers leave the profession in 5 years. And most of them leave not because they don't love teaching, but for economic and financial reasons. And that's the shame of it all. That's the shame of it. Teaching is one of the most fulfilling things. I didn't realize this until I became an assemblyman. It's not that I didn't like being an assemblyman, but I was asked to come teach at my schools. Could you teach a social science class, American history class at Madison High School, or social studies at Cunningham Junior High School? And I'd go and teach for, half a day. I loved it. It's so fulfilling. And I realized, had I had that experience earlier, I might have wanted to become a teacher. But I didn't think of it. My parents didn't push me in that direction, nor did they push me in the direction of being a politician. When I first ran for assembly, my mother actually sent notes to her friends saying, don't vote for him, he'll get this dumb idea out of his head and become a lawyer like he's supposed to. But in any case, so we want to do things. So we need to keep this program funded, and unfortunately, the Secretary of Education wants to cut it. But we have a budget coming up in the next month, and I want to assure the people here across the education spectrum we're going to fight hard to keep Title II fully funded at its $2 billion level. And second is the PSLF program, which stands for Public Service Loan Forgiveness. I was one of the originators of this program. And it tells young people, you go into teaching, you won't have such a big burden of student loans on your back. We passed it. We put $3.5 billion into it for over a period of years. And Secretary DeVos, who really everyone knows this is anti-public education, has spent 1% of it and wants to cut it back. So the second thing we want to do is put in legislation that forces the Department of Education to spend all of the money we allocated this year, which would be a real shot in the arm to help teachers. So those are the two things that we're doing. 1%, that's incredible. And what the program does is, after you've been repaying your loans for 10 years, you get forgiven. So you know when you're starting a family, buying a house, you'll know that you'll have an extra stream of income later. And we would expand it so it affects all federal loans, including consolidated federal loans. People were encouraged to consolidate their loans. I'm going to mention you, Adam. So for instance, Adam Eck. He's 23 years old. He's a physics teacher.
You taught for 23 years.
Oh,
It's been a rough 23 years.
I said to myself, he doesn't look 23.
See what teaching does.
I said, this guy was smart. He must have got out of school at college at age 20. He's a 20. Well, one thing you can say about Adam, he doesn't look as old as somebody who's been teaching 23 years. Anyway, he's a 23-year Brighton High School physics teacher. We all know how important that subject is. And he's with his wife, Courtney. Is she here? No. But she is also a teacher here in Brighton. And they wanted to enroll in the PSLF program, but because they consolidated their loans as a family, the Department of Education said no. They're just looking for excuses not to fund and work this program. So we would say all consolidated loans are eligible for the PSLF program. Okay? Our legislation also doesn't just say after 10 years, that's the legislation on the books, that they're not spending the money, but we, as I said, we improve it. And one of the ways we improve it is we front load the incentive, and we allow the students to have 50% of their loans forgiven in 5 years. So let's say their loans are $50,000 and they've paid $10,000, $15,000 more would be forgiven. So it's a great thing to do. So we have to do this. We're short of teachers here as school begins. Teachers are the lifeblood. One of the things parents in America worry about is, will my kids have a good future? And if we don't have teachers, they won't have a good future no matter how hard they try. So we need to do these things quickly and many other things so that teaching, so that we don't no longer have a shortage of teachers, and that people who want to teach will be financially able to teach. Now with that, we're going to have a few more people talk about this, and first we're going to have someone who's worked really hard for all, how many total students are in your jurisdiction, Sherry?
Oh, that was an excellent question that I don't have the exact answer to.
Well, she's-
But there are 23 school districts if you count our two BOCES,
Yeah.
which our board members are part of. And so we have 195 board members and superintendents that are part of our association.
So probably,
So-
certainly tens of,
109,000 is what I think.
over
our limit is.
100,000 students
Yeah,
represented
because
by
we also
Sherry.
have two other counties that have
Great.
school districts.
And
in
she's
our
executive director of Monroe County School Board Association.
Thank you.
Sherry, you're on.
I'm taking this.
Oh, that's yours.
Yeah, this one's mine.
Right.
Thanks.
Sorry, well, I don't know if I'm sorry or not.
Good afternoon, everyone. So around this time yesterday afternoon, our association legislative committee met to talk about their priorities for the year. And it took about a minute to bring teacher shortage to the top of that list. And 18 of our 21 school districts were represented at that meeting, as well as our two BOCES. So we had a big crowd, and this was their main topic. And that's because every single one of our school districts in our county, and including the 3 school districts outside of our county, we have 2 in Orleans and 1 in Ontario that are members, need teachers. And not just in the historically hard to fill areas like physics and math and technology and English as a second language, but across all of our curricular areas and across all of our support areas. And I know Senator Schumer mentioned some of those, but languages other than English, schools are cutting Italian, and they're finding they can't find American Sign Language teachers, and French, as you mentioned. We can't find speech pathologists or occupational therapists or physical therapists. CTE, so our career and technical education, they're chemistry, school psychologists that we need more than ever right now, and bilingual teachers, and that would be especially for our Rochester City School District. So our association understands the issue around this. At the elementary level, where we traditionally have a lot of candidates, and Dr. Wisnowski will probably speak to this, our districts are reporting that they're finding fewer elementary. That is usually our largest pool. They're finding fewer elementary candidates as well. So our association membership believes that we have to invest in and elevate the teaching profession. We have to. And we need to find ways to recreate interest in becoming a teacher. And we will need legislative help to do that if we are going to keep the quality of education, as Senator Schumer mentioned, strong in this region, but across the state as well. And that's why we so appreciate the help that you're going to provide us to deal with the teacher shortage. Sorry. I became a board member in 1998.
Wow.
Which I believe when you were first
I
elected.
became the senator in
the senator.
1998.
And through all of those years, no matter what we have brought forward to you, we have always found you supportive
Thank
of
you.
public education.
I believe in it.
So on behalf of our entire association and the students that they serve, we want to thank you for, again, taking this on and helping us with this particular issue.
Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate that very, very much. I've always believed in education. My kids went to public schools, got good educations. And, you know, I remember, I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing if not for Mrs. Wagman, my social studies teacher in high school. I remember Mrs. Roberts teaching me about science. I could remember certain things like, well, she made us be the moon and the sun and go around. That was like in 4th grade or something. But it was great. They're great. And we need good teachers more than ever. And who can represent that is somebody who represents teachers across New York State, also probably in the hundreds of thousands, would you say?
We have 600,000 members, 400,000 active teachers.
Is Jolene DeBrango from NYSA, which stands for New York State United Teachers. She's the exec vice president of that very fine organization that works so hard for teachers.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. Appreciate it. On behalf of the New York State United Teachers, we do want to thank you, Senator, for your continuous support of public schools and public educators. And we wholeheartedly believe in what Senator Schumer is trying to do. In the next 10 years, according to the New York State Teacher Retirement System, we expect to need 180,000 teachers here in New York State. That is a crisis. And so 2 years ago, we started the Take a Look at Teaching initiative through the New York State United Teachers to do what Sherry was talking about, which is to elevate the profession because we believe it's the best job in the world and it's the most important job in the world. To make sure that we have diversity among our workforce, 43% of the students in New York State are students of color. Only 16% of the teaching force currently are teachers of color. And we need to be sure that all students benefit from a diverse workforce. So that's one part of our initiative. And we are definitely trying to remove barriers, and we're working with colleges and higher ed professionals to work with our P-12 teachers, administrators, board members to find sustainable solutions. One of those barriers is definitely the loans that our teachers face, and it's a burden to them. They are working, and Ann will talk about this, for years and years and years under incredible debt. So we definitely are supportive of your efforts to maintain that program and hopefully to have the federal government expand it. And certainly one of the things that we hear all the time with focus groups and through surveys is that professional learning is one of the most important things for teachers. It helps retain teachers. It helps recruit teachers to know that they'll be supported in the classroom. Those Title II funds are essential to recruiting and retaining teachers. And so we're fully supportive of that at NYSA. We actually have our own professional learning program, our Education and Learning Trust, and it's something that we believe very strongly in. And if we are going to elevate the profession, we need to provide our teachers with what they need, those tools, and professional learning is certainly one of them. So I thank you today.
Thank you very
Yes.
much. Appreciate it. You'll see, we have so many dedicated people for education. In each school, there are really teachers who are not just there earning a living. They really care about their jobs and they care about their kids. I mean, one example, I don't know what the number is, maybe you know it, Jolene. The average teacher shells out hundreds of dollars out of their own pockets to pay for materials and things, because they believe. And they're not rich people, but they do it because of their faith and belief in the kids that they teach. So we have a lot of great representatives here, but we are trying to touch each school boards, teachers, and now our schools of education. And Dr. Mike Wisnowski is one of the leading educators in our state. He's Dean of the Ralph C. Wilson School of Education at St. John Fisher. So please come up. Where are you? There you are. Okay, good. Thank you. Please come up. Mike.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Senator Schumer. Our teacher education programs have certainly felt the lack of interest in teaching in the last few years, and we're hoping that's turning around. We're seeing some signs that there is new interest, but I don't want to lose that momentum. As with other parts of the country, New York State and our local region are experiencing a teacher shortage with a 49% drop in college students taking up teaching since 2009. And they've mentioned the different content areas that are hurting especially, but middle and secondary and elementary are key areas, and especially special education. One thing that we do at St. John Fisher College is that all of our teachers are duly certified. So not only do you get your content area in either childhood or adolescence, but you also have the special education certification. We've talked about some of the regional situations. I'm going to quote a little bit from Linda Darling-Hammond, a great researcher in education, about what would enhance the supply of qualified teachers for high-need fields and locations through targeted training, subsidies, and high retention pathways, the first thing she mentions is forgivable loans. And it seems very unfair that a program is out there that's promised these things to people and it's not following through. So I really thank Senator Schumer for following through on that. Locally too, we've talked about teacher residency, working with the BOCES superintendents. We have the Teacher Immersion Fellows program as well, working together with the deans of schools of educations in the area. And then we're trying to create pathways with Rochester City School District to try to create more interest in teaching and bring them to our colleges. So again, thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you very much. And finally, representing the teachers themselves is Adam Eck, who is a 23-year teacher of physics here at Brighton. And as I mentioned, he and his wife consolidated their loans. And Mr. Voss, who she just does everything she can to tear down public education. I hate to say it, but that's the truth. Finds ways not to implement this program. As I said, money is there. We want to expand it, as I mentioned, to the 5 years. But right now, the money is there for after 10 years, you're forgiven, and she's not spending it and using different excuses, such as the one Adam will mention. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Senator Schumer, and everyone here involved. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. So trying to decide exactly where to begin. I've wanted to be a teacher since I was a young kid. My 8th grade math teacher, Roy Welkley at Baytrail Middle School in Penfield. What a fabulous man. I went home, I want to be just like him when I grow up. And that was it. I was going to be a teacher, and I went away to school, and that was it. And I've been driven for that ever since. And I love every step of it. And my wife saw how much I love being a teacher, and she became a teacher too. She teaches the functional skills classroom here at the middle school, and we absolutely love what we do. And we enjoy it, but at the same time, it has been a difficult road. My friends will say, well, Adam, why don't you take your degrees in math and physics and go double your salary somewhere else? I'm like,
Right.
I don't want to do that because I love what I do. I love the kids. I love those aha moments. I can't quit what I'm so passionate about. And so we were looking into these loan forgiveness programs and stuff, and we'd heard a number of different reasons. As Senator Schumer mentioned, they said, well, because your wife and you had consolidated your loans together, even though we're both working in the school system, you don't qualify. And then we would go through another avenue, and they say, well, because your loans came from this branch of a loan company, that it doesn't qualify. And we just get these reasons one after another. And the result of different things, and I could go on about how we are in this situation, but I've been paying almost for 23 years now, and my wife and I still have over $140,000 in student loans. We probably won't retire when we're eligible because they won't be paid off. And my own children right now, my oldest son just started his junior year, and talking to them, what do you think you want to do when you grow up? And unfortunately, he says, well, I know I don't want to be a teacher because I don't want to live in that financial world that you live in. And that's my story.
You did great. You did the best of everybody. I was talking about the dedication of teachers, but my talk meant nothing compared to what Adam had to say. We'll take some questions.
Senator, how would you, though, try to jumpstart that program to
Okay.
get Adam's money back?
Yeah, we're going to tell the Department of Education that if they don't spend the money that's already been allocated, we're going to cut back on a whole lot of other, we're not going to give them the kind of funding for salaries that the administrators who are cutting back will do. We're going to do stuff like that. It's outrageous. She's
Basic horse
using your
trading?
money, DeVos, for things, to help private schools, to not help schools at all. And for-profit colleges, she likes those. We don't have too many of those here in Rochester. But we're going to force her to do it by using leverage over other funding things she wants and needs.
Senator, there was a recent study that showed that the population of students in general in Monroe County alone has decreased by nearly 12,000 over the last 10 years. I think anyone who hears that will say, if we have less students, don't we need less teachers?
Well, first of all, teaching is becoming you need better and better teachers and more refined skills in this new world, because you're not going to get a good job unless you have really good skills. And teaching has become better because we have more knowledge of how to teach, and we have more different types of courses. If you're, say, hearing impaired or whatever, you're gonna get help and you can learn. So even though we have fewer students, first of all, the ratio is still worse overwhelmingly. Even if you count for the 12,000 fewer students, the ratio of teachers is much, much higher, because we've lost teachers disproportionately to the number. But we need more and better teachers. We've all learned that smaller class size, you know, yeah, maybe 20 years ago there were 30 kids in a class, and we think the ideal is 20. You need more teachers to do that. And what parent, you know, people live in a lot of the communities that we've mentioned here, and they pay pretty high taxes, school taxes, because they want the best education for their kids. That's the reason they do it. And so to say we ought to just cut back doesn't make sense.
The program you talked about that gives money to incentivize districts to recruit, what specifically does it do, and is it eliminated under the current administration, or is it something that you actually have a vote on?
We have a vote on, but they want to eliminate it. They proposed slashing it, called Title II. And in terms of, it's not only to attract teachers, it's to retain teachers as well. And does anyone want to talk about that? Jolene.
With professional development.
Right,
Is that what it
it's
was?
really focused on professional development, and so.
And teachers, what the studies show is when they have this professional development, they stay,
Correct.
because they feel capable and able to do more.
Our early educator, you know, our educators 1 through 5, they need a different type of learning. Also, when you have diverse candidates for teachers, they also need the research shows that they need more intensive professional development to give them the tools and skills to ensure that they're successful and that they remain in the profession. And once you're in the profession for up to 5 years, you know, your learning never stops. We are continuous learners. It's what we do as educators. That's why we like to be in schools, because we like to learn. But it's necessary to keep your toolbox, as the senator said, sharp, so that you're meeting the needs of all students. And our student body is definitely changing, to your first question, that while we may have lost some students, the student body that we're seeing now, students come with trauma, you know, severe trauma. We see with the opioid epidemic, we see students who have been impacted by that. We see a lot of English language learners coming into our communities, which adds so much value to our schools, but also their needs are different. So, you know.
And in a need when our workforce is shrinking, you can't just say, let's write these kids off. Let's take every kid as a great human resource that we can develop potentially.
Would the teachers themselves have to pay for that development, or would that then
No.
fall on the local districts if this money doesn't come
Well, it's
through?
the federal money
It would be the
pays
federal
for it.
money.
Right, but if
And
it
it's paid through
doesn't,
the districts, not to the teachers.
but the threat is to cut that money, right?
Yes,
So then
well, you
where
know, what
would
will the
that come
districts
from?
do? Cut back on, you know, something else to pay for this? You don't want them to be.
Right.
We should be funding schools. The federal government should be helping schools more, not less.
We were in Mount Vernon yesterday, and the local leader there said the district can only afford to mentor 20 teachers, but they hired more than 20 teachers. So there will be teachers who will not receive any mentor at all. They said last year they hired up to 100 teachers, and there's a majority of those teachers that were not successful, that will not be coming back. They also did not have mentors.
If you don't get a mentor program in your, you know, and our population's changing, so you need a little more effort for some of the kids.
Can
For a
someone
variety of
address the aging teaching population, the people who are gonna retire in the next
Yeah,
10 to 15 years?
that's a great point. Who would like to do that?
One-third of the
Okay.
population.
Our Brighton
Yeah, if you could come to the
superintendent.
mic, sorry, it's.
No, that's right, so I'll say this, I think Jolene gave the numbers far better than I could, but I will say, first of all, the people leaving us are absolutely the most talented, dedicated, committed individuals, and they are walking out the door with an incredible amount of experience and knowledge and expertise with kids that we don't want to lose. So that's a real issue for us around how do we continue to keep that legacy of excellence and build on all that great experience. So it's a struggle within districts to replace that as people are leaving. So fortunately, Adam won't be leaving for a long time, because he's only 23 years old. But Adam's expertise is very, very hard to replace with a brand new teacher who, in their own right, bring a different skill set and new experiences, new knowledge, et cetera, and that's very important. But it's awfully difficult to replace that expertise that Adam has. So those mentoring programs, those Title II programs, all of the different ways that we support teachers in terms of professional development, build capacity for a newer teacher, for less experienced people, to match that excellence that Adam has built up over many years.
Okay. I have one more point I wanted to make on another subject, which is good news. We've all, and some of you have been here when we've talked about the flooding on the shores of Lake Ontario. Well, our town supervisor of Greece, Bill Rylick, has now been appointed to the advisory committee to the IJC, and he will be a great advocate for us in terms of the IJC doing much more to prevent the kind of flooding. Congressman Morelli, he represents
Yes.
Brighton, and I have pushed hard for it, and he was appointed yesterday. We couldn't have he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, but we couldn't have a better representative on that committee. So that's good news for the people along the shore, on the shorefront of Rochester, all the way from Sodus Bay through Greece and Orleans County.
Nice bipartisanship.
Yes.
I wanted to ask another question about the schools, that's right, and Kevin, it might be best for you. I was under the impression that, especially in the suburbs, when a vacancy opens up for teachers, there are often hundreds of applicants. And admittedly, this is the first time that I'm hearing that we've had vacancies where nobody applied. What am I not getting?
Two things. First of all, you're correct. In years past, we had hundreds of applicants. So what we're seeing in the harder to fill areas in particular, so some of those are mentioned, in highly specialized science, math positions, special education positions, English as a new language positions, those are the most difficult to fill, and there's a dramatic increase in the need, particularly around English as a new language. Our population has increased significantly in all of the suburban districts, and certainly in the city district as well, and there just are not enough people. Also, as regulations have changed to require more instruction for different types of students. And what we are seeing is in some of those areas, those highly specialized areas, it is very difficult to fill positions, and we are not seeing nearly the same number of applicants. I think as Mike Wisnowski said, the 49% drop in the number of people, we are now seeing that as an impact. There's a spillover impact to that too, in not having enough qualified substitute teachers. So people who have not received positions in the hiring process, who used to be then very reliable substitute teachers for us, are just not available. And they're choosing other professions instead of the substitute teacher route. So less people, less excellence, and certainly smaller pools. I will tell you though, in the statewide view, what we see is in less economically advantaged communities, an even greater need. So as capacity is less in that community and the needs are higher in those communities as well, we see far fewer numbers of applicants, and that's a real concern for superintendents statewide.
And I just want to call on Bill Maley.
Well, just real quick, just sort of piggyback on that, because you are a representative of all the superintendents.
Correct.
Is it urban and very rural areas that are having the biggest problem? Where is the biggest problem right now, Kevin?
Well, I'd say we're seeing it everywhere, right? So it is across the entire state. It's not limited to one type of school district. I think this was a problem experienced more so in areas with less capacity earlier on, but it is now affecting everybody statewide.
I'll say that throughout New York State and throughout the Rochester area. 5-10 years ago, the city of Rochester would have trouble, but a district like Brighton or Penfield would not. And now it's spread so that even some of the more affluent districts, the districts that are known for their excellence, are still having trouble. It's across the board. And schools are so important to just the lifeblood of a community, so he always comes, he's a great supervisor, and I've neglected to call on him, but he didn't even want to speak, but I'm gonna just ask him to say a few words. Bill Maley, our 6'8" town supervisor. I got that right.
Thank you, Senator. And you know, it's not everybody that gets my name right every time either. So speaking of, you know, an All-American, it's always good to work with the senator. But those of you that are close to Brighton know, education is part of the DNA of Brighton. It is so critical to who we are as a community. Just last night, you saw hundreds of people out of the front lawn of Brighton High School for a food truck event, gathering together as a community. That's what this community is about. That's what this school district brings to the community. And it's critical, and I'm really grateful that we have the senator's support in making sure that education programs are well funded. The taxpayers of Brighton do play a huge role in making sure that the quality education in Brighton continues, but we can't do what we do without the kind of support that Senator Schumer brings to us. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you for being here. Thank you to everybody around me that lives and breathes education in this community every day.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.